Hello, and welcome to Documentation and Foster Parent Handbook Training. Before we begin, let's cover a few ground rules. At the conclusion of tonight's training, there's going to be a documentation test. Make sure that you turn that in to your Pathways family specialist or home developer. This is the first quarter test for licensed foster parents and adoptive parents. So remember, it is one test per person. You cannot do joint work, you cannot share. So one test per individual. Please make sure that you turn that into your Pathways family specialist or Pathways home developer. So let's get started. We're going to talk a little bit about documentation training in the Pathways Foster Parent Handbook. When we think about the Foster Parent Handbook, this is available from your Pathways Family Specialist. If you want a copy, please ask. You probably received one already going through the licensing process. In the Foster Parent Handbook, the purpose is to provide the foster and adoptive parents with Pathways policies, procedures, a summary of minimum standards, and general guidance. The handbook offers a detailed table of contents to guide foster parents through questions that may arise. Not only are policies and procedures covered, but definitions, roles, and reimbursement schedules. When we look at the definition of a document is to provide written information as proof or evidence of an event or an occurrence. Remember, if we didn't document it, it didn't happen. So it's very important that we constantly document all of the days, goings-ons, the child's behaviors and incidents that happen and occur. Documentation must be taken seriously by foster parents as this is a compliance regulation. Whenever our files are monitored and regulated by residential child care regulations, they're in random office visits, then they do look at this documentation as a part of compliance. All information must be accurate with no faulty exaggerations. And remember, like we said earlier, if you don't document it, it didn't happen. The purpose and the goal for documentation is to provide information relating to the child's treatment team. Now, the child's treatment team consists of Pathways, which is your Pathways family specialist and program manager, CPS worker and their supervisor, the attorney ad litem that represents the child, CASA or child advocates, depending on what county that you live in, therapist. Those are all of the child's treatment team. So we want to make sure that we keep them informed of what is going on in the child's life. Information should reflect the positive aspects of the child's life, as well as those negative behaviors that need continued monitoring and support. When you're doing your documentation, it's really important that you don't find the time to sit down and vent at that point. This is where we want to be accurate and factual about the child's day-to-day events. We want to not only document the negative, because we got to make sure that the appropriate treatment services are in place for that child, but we also want to document all the successes that they have as well. Therapists and treatment specialists also provide documentation that goes into the child's record. Any information that's put in the child's record does become a legal document. Now, many times with CPS, we work closely with CPS workers. If there is a case that the case goal changes to adoption and they follow through with termination of parental rights, it's not uncommon for the attorneys that represent the parents to request the documents that CPS has. And at this point is where Pathways could receive a subpoena on all of our records. At that point, CPS and the attorneys that represent the biological parents are privy to that information. Foster parent documentation can be called at any time by judges or CPS workers who are responsible for the welfare of the children. Other people who read the child's record include Youth for Tomorrow. Youth for Tomorrow is a private agency that CPS contracts with. They're located in Arlington, Texas, and they review all the levels of care of the children in foster care in the state of Texas. So YFT is who assigns those levels of care. They're going to read that documentation in the SSCC regions in Texas, which are regions 11, 2, 3B, 8B. I think that's all of them. I feel like I'm missing one. But anyway, those SSC regions oftentimes use their own processes, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, OCOK and 3B does use Youth for Tomorrow to monitor their levels of care. Youth for Tomorrow and SSCC regions rely almost completely on what is written in the child's record to determine their level of care. Whenever Youth for Tomorrow reviews our records, they're only looking at the last 30 days of information. So it's important during those last 30 days that you're accurate in making your documentation. They're looking at your notes, they're looking at Pathways family specialist notes, therapy notes, any school incidents, report cards, that could be psychological evaluation, any doctor or dental visits, that could include vision and hearing screenings, medication monitoring reviews, any incident reports within the school or the daycare, any of those pertinent information and documents that happened over the last 30 days. That's what they're going to be taking into consideration when they determine that child's level of care. So one thing they may also look at is the therapeutic recreation calendar. This is required for children who are specialized in intense level of care. If you currently have a child in your home that is a basic or moderate level of care, then you do not have to complete the therapeutic recreation calendar. In the therapeutic recreation calendar, this information is provided for each child in the family and put in the child's record, indicating the family activities, outside the activities, and those planned activities that we will have with the child. I'll show you at the conclusion of this, I have an information packet that we will attach to the test and the email that goes out to you with the link. In that information packet, we're going to show you some examples of a therapeutic recreation calendar. Privileges and rewards. It's really important. This is going to indicate the special activities that will be available to the foster child and incentives for positive behaviors. Whenever you're writing your foster parent notes, it's important that you do address what those household rules are, the violations the child may have made to those rules, what the consequences were for violation of those rules, like cursing, talking back, walking out of the home, destruction of property, defiance. And then we want to be clear and concise with those consequences, and then also talk about rewards. Because again, we don't only want to document the negative behaviors, we also have to document the positive. So an example would be dinner and a movie of a child's choice for a positive behavior. So that's something that we would document in your notes, as that's maybe a goal that they worked through for the end of the week. If they made it through the whole week without getting in trouble at school, getting their name on the board, a ticket pulled, going to the principal's office, then that was a goal maybe that we worked for towards the end of the week for that child. Household rules. Rules come in age-level forms to be filled out and provided for the child's file. I think it's important, if you do start off with younger children and you increase your age range, or that child in your home kind of grows into a different age level, that we update those household rules that are appropriate for the child's developmental and maturity level. Consequences. We need to outline what those consequences are. Things like timeout, revoking privileges, early bedtime, extra chores. What are some other things people do? What are some examples that you may have in your home? So we want to make sure that we document that. Now, do remember that our consequences cannot be a violation of a child's right or a violation of a licensing standard. We cannot deny a child food as a form of punishment. We cannot make them write sentences as a form of punishment, do exercises as a form of punishment. So we've got to remember, when we talk about in behavior intervention, those rules that we go through, those state licensing regulations on things that we cannot use as a form of punishment, constantly keep those in the forefront of your mind. The house rules should be discussed in a developmentally appropriate manner with the child. Many families will also post the household rules as well as daily and weekly schedules in the home so that the child can see them. Put it in a public place, like with a refrigerator magnets on the refrigerator where they can see it. I've seen some families post them on a cork board where they may also not only have the household rules and daily schedules, but also the floor plan of the home with the evacuation route, your foster parent license, as well as the ombudsman's flyers, both in English and in Spanish. Clothing inventory. This form is to document the amount of clothing a child comes with and other valuable items. Now, whenever we place a child in your home, per licensing regulations, when we come back to do our 7-day contact, we have to pick up the clothing inventory from you. It's very important to document what the child came into care with. Not only clothes, but personal belongings. If they came with a tablet, a teddy bear, a backpack, any of those types of things that are belonging to that child. Those lists should be updated at placement. And then also the items that we add or discard as that child may grow. They outgrow their clothes. They may become developmentally more mature, where they're no longer going to play with toys as a young child. So it's okay for us to purge those things and either sell them in a garage sale, donate them to Goodwill, or whatever that might look like in your home. But we do have to document those discarded items. And then we have to update that on a quarterly basis. This is a contract, a CPS contract standard. So every quarter, whenever you're doing your quarterly reviews with your Pathways family specialist, you will also have to update that clothing inventory checklist. Now, one reason we also chose to teach foster parent handbook and documentation training at the beginning of the year in the first quarter is because we're coming out of Christmas. A lot of kids make out like bandits during Christmas. So it's really important to document a lot of those new toys, tablets, clothes, bikes, video games, Xbox, those types of things that they may have received as part of their personal items. So that if that child does leave, if they return home to their parents, they go to live with relatives, they become adopted, they age out of foster care, whatever their permanency goal may be, we have to document that they leave with those personal items. Now, we get the question a lot, what if a family buys an Xbox or a PlayStation for the family? Then that is the family's Xbox, or those generic toys that we may have regardless. So those things are okay, but if that child personally receives it at Christmas, birthdays, as rewards throughout the year, we need to document it and keep a detailed list of what those personal belongings are. So make sure that you're updating those on that quarterly basis and turning that into your Pathways family specialist. Incident reports. We like to talk about incidents. A serious incident requires the foster parent to notify Pathways within 24 hours or as quick as soon as you become aware of it, depending on what that serious incident is. So again, a review of what some serious incidents are is a child death, which is usually pertinent to our medically fragile foster homes, critical injury, which could be a broken bone, a burn, or stitches. Illness or hospitalization, allegations of abuse, neglect, physical abuse, child-on-child physical abuse, child sexual abuse, and with any type of sexual abuse, whether that's child-on-child sexual abuse or a disclosure of sexual abuse, we have to report that as soon as you become aware of it. The arrest of a child run away or becomes absent, and as we know, there's 3 different criteria for that: children 0 to 6, 6 to 13, and then 13 to 17. We have different time frames that we have to report in. Communicable diseases, please remember, especially with COVID, because that is the most highly contagious communicable disease that we're dealing with at the present moment. If you contract COVID, not only you as a foster parent, but any person in your household, as well as the foster child, you need to report that as soon as you become aware of it to your Pathways family specialist. This also counts even if you're an empty foster home that do not currently have children in the home. So please make sure that you make every effort to contact your Pathways family specialist or a Pathways staff member as soon as you become aware of it. And then a suicide attempt. So those are some of our serious incidents that we want to make sure that you're constantly keeping Pathways in the loop and letting us know about those incidents, and then documenting that incident as well. The travel authorization. This form must be given to the child's family specialist at least 14 days prior to the departure date, except in the case of emergencies. Now, I would tell you the sooner you find out, the better. If you're planning a trip to Disney World this summer and you know 3 months in advance we're going to be heading to Disney World, please let CPS and all the parties know so that way we can start working on having that travel authorization approved. As we all know, there are some CPS workers that are much more responsive than others. This way, it gives us time if we cannot get a hold of that CPS worker, or maybe they're on leave and we're not aware of it. It gives us time to go to their supervisor and then to the program director and work our way up the chain of command to that regional director. So we want to make sure we try to start as soon as we become aware of it. Travel authorizations do have to be signed anytime that we're going out of state lines or anywhere in the state of Texas for more than 72 hours. Let's say you live in Houston and we're going to go to San Antonio for the weekend to visit family members. As long as you let Pathways know and the CPS worker know where your whereabouts are going to be for that 72 hours, that Friday through Sunday, we're going to be good. Now, if you're going to go to San Antonio for the week, it's spring break, and we're going to go hit up Fiesta, Texas, and the Alamo, and the Wax Museum, and SeaWorld, and all of those fun things, Natural Bridge Caverns, then we're going to need to make sure we get that travel authorization signed because that's going to be more than 72 hours. In some instances, certain judges do like to be that final approval for that travel authorization. So again, we just want to make sure that we're getting that travel authorization out in plenty of time. A foster child cannot be taken out of the state or away from the home for more than 72 hours without the knowledge and consent of both Pathways and CPS. CPS is the managing conservator. They do have to give that final say. Medical report forms. Forms should be taken to every doctor, psychiatrist, dentist, eye exam, hearing screening, whatever it may be, to be completed by the practitioner at the time of the visit. What I've seen a lot of families do is make copies of the medical report form, and then they place it in the glove compartment of their car in a folder where they always have access to it. Never fails when we get to the doctor's office, we forget that form. So if you put it in your car, especially several of them in the glove compartment, you have that easy access to them so that they can be completed by that practitioner at the time of the visit. Now, once that visit is completed, a copy of the form needs to be submitted to your family specialist following the appointment. Whenever we upload that document into our Pathways database, which is called Extended Reach, it does automatically email a copy to the CPS worker so that they have a copy of it as well. So that way we're making sure we're getting those 3-day medical screenings, physical exams, dental exams, well child checks, psychiatric medication monitoring, vision and hearing screenings, all of those things done on a timely basis and making sure that that child's well-being is being cared for. Make sure that medical consent form has been approved by CPS prior to administering any new psychotropic medication. So again, remember there is the CPS form for psychotropic meds that has to be signed by the doctor, the treating physician or practitioner, because some doctors have nurse practitioners or a physician's assistant that may see the child. So they do have to sign off on that. And we're going to provide a copy to CPS. CPS has to give that approval before we can have that psychotropic medication filled. This is for new psychotropic medication diagnosis or prescription. This is not for medication monitoring where we're getting the same medication, but we're getting refills. It's not required at that point. It's only for a new prescription for a medication. So that's when we want to get that completed. The medication log. This needs to be filled out daily on every child. This gives a record of each medication taken, including the name, dosage, and time administered to the child. This is also going to include psychotropic medications, prescribed medications, the reason for the medication, and if it's the over-the-counter medication. So this also includes vitamins, melatonin, omega-3s, Flintstone vitamins, gummy vitamins, baby rash cream. Every time that we apply the baby rash, cream when we change the diaper. You've got to make sure you're logging it on your medication log. For teenagers, this could be acne medication. Or medicated lotion. So we've got to make sure that we are documenting those medications on the medication log. And also remember, medications have to be locked. Psychotropic medications have to be double locked, or type 2 medications. Not only psychotropic meds, but also things like muscle relaxers or painkillers. The form still has to be completed on any medication given on an as-needed basis. This is usually our over-the-counter medication, like Tylenol, Advil, Benadryl, any of those types of things, which can include supplements, medicated lotions, and ointments. When you're typing or you're writing your progress notes for your child in your home, the rules of writing the foster parent log: don't be vague in describing the child's behavior. We want to elaborate as much as possible. It's kind of like when we read a book. You know, how boring would a book be when we read it if it just contained little paragraphs of a couple of things that happen in a person's life? So we want to elaborate as much as possible. We want to describe, don't prescribe. Don't say that you believe this child has ADHD or bipolar or depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. We want to describe those behaviors that are leading you to that assumption of them having a behavioral health diagnosis. So describe as much as possible. If the child curses, in your notes, don't write the child cursed, because your idea of a curse word, my idea of a curse word, or the person reading these notes, like Youth for Tomorrow, idea of a curse word can be completely different. So we want to make sure you put in quotation marks, word for word, exactly what that child said. Describe interventions and specify consequences and privileges lost or earned. So we're describing the interventions. A child can be a moderate or specialized level of care. Maybe they had a really good month this last 30 days, but the reason they had this really good month is because we hovered over the top of them the entire time so that they did not hit other children. They did not run away. They did not sexually act out with another child or become physically aggressive. So describe all of those interventions that were made to keep that child redirected and on the straight and narrow. Document both those positive and negative behaviors. If we went to Chick-fil-A and the child threw a ball 2 inches from another child's face, if they shoved them down the slide, if they're having these acting out behaviors, we need to be documenting all of that. But if we did go to Chick-fil-A and that child had a wonderful day and they socially interacted well with the other children, when it was time to go, they didn't have a meltdown, that's a wonderful day. We need to make sure we're documenting that, because a lot of times our brain says that's normal. That's what we expect of them. But how much work did it take to get to that child, get that child in the place in their life so that they were acting with appropriate social skills and boundaries? When we came home from school or daycare, the child put their books away or put their shoes away. They had their snack and they cleaned up after themselves. They did their chores without being asked. Document those things. Those are great things. That shows a lot of success in the way that you are parenting to get that child to where they are today. So make sure that we're documenting not only the negative behaviors, the atypical behaviors that may be stemming from trauma, but also the positive behaviors that we've been working on, the successes for that child. Don't exaggerate behaviors to maintain a child's level of care or to have their level of care increased. We've heard the horror stories of people that have documented negative behaviors so that the child's level of care can stay increased. The negative impact on this is when that child becomes legally available for adoption, especially if the foster parent does not have the intent to adopt that child, when the adoptive family is selected for that child in an adoption selection staffing, a lot of times once they read that child's case file, they reject the child. They tell CPS this child has more needs than what I'm capable of parenting, and so that child does not get adopted. So we do need to make sure that we are being factual in our statements and that we are documenting the good and the bad, and not exaggerating those behaviors. Some more rules of making your progress notes. Don't talk negatively about caseworkers or biological parents. Again, this could be subpoenaed into a termination hearing, and I have seen it to where these notes have been read aloud, where a foster parent talked very negatively about a biological parent, and so we don't want anybody put on that spot. It's okay to say factual statements. If the parent did not show up for a family visit, that's a factual statement. That's not an opinion. So those types of things are okay to write, but we don't want to write opinions or negatives about the biological parent or caseworkers. Take respite in order to maintain self-care and document the dates of respite. You've got to give yourself a break. You've got to keep, those self-help skills going in the right direction. Give yourself a break, maintain sanity, so that you are ready to face some of those atypical behaviors, complex, confusing behaviors that we see from some of our children with trauma history. Document the fun times you have together as a foster family. That's going to include recreational activities or positive emotions that we may see. So we want to see those types of fun things kids to do. Participating, in Sunday school, choir, youth group on a Sunday, the extracurricular activities they do at school, winning an award at school for their best art project, whatever it may be, we want to make sure that we're getting the positive aspects of this child's life as well. Document as if the person reading the logs get the feeling of actually being there. Kind of like when we're reading a book. We want to have that feeling of actually being there. So those are some really good rules on your progress notes. Due dates. All monthly paperwork is due no later than the 5th of the following month. However, there is a minimum due date depending on if the child is from an SSCC region. So if you do have a child from an SSCC region, they may have a different due dates, but for our children where we're working directly with the FPS, we try to make sure that all of those documents are turned in the 5th of the following month. So some of that paperwork could include progress notes, that's your monthly foster parent notes, medication logs, medical report forms, Medicaid card, school notes, report cards, behavior referrals, incident reports, or therapy notes. That could be from an occupational, speech, or physical therapist, as well as an individual therapist. So we want to make sure that we're getting those turned in on a monthly basis. Like we said, the 5th of the following month. So here is the document that you should also be receiving with all the examples. I like to give this out to our families as we license them in the Houston area because it kind of gives you some ideas as you begin to start your documentation. When we talked about Youth for Tomorrow, there are different levels of care in Texas. So in this packet, it will show you some characteristics of children that are on a basic service level, as well as moderate service level, and specialized service level. So as you're writing your notes or you have a child in your home and you wonder if that child's level of care could be raised, this is something that's kind of good to be able to reflect on and see if that child meets any of this criteria. And if so, we can submit that information to Youth for Tomorrow. Recreation calendar. We talked about the therapeutic recreation calendar. The goal for the recreation calendar per licensing standards is to ensure the opportunity to participate in community activities such as school sports or other extracurricular school activities, religious activities, or local service events are available to children. Some good examples are going to the park, youth sports. We have a lot of children that are in Little League baseball, cheerleading, and gymnastics. For young children, sometimes it's a little bit harder to think of some recreational activities. therapeutic recreational activities. Story time is a great thing to go to the library. It's socialization skills with other children, interaction. So that would be something good for younger children. As kids get older, we have more opportunities through extracurricular activities at the school, like not only sports like baseball and football, but then we also start having drama and choir and band and FFA, and those different types of things that kids have the opportunity to participate in. During the summertime, swimming lessons, family walks and bike rides, teaching the children how to ride a bike or a skateboard, dance classes, Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, birthday parties with other children. That is a recreational activity. For younger children, this could be playtime with other kids where we go to a park or somewhere where we're, again, working on social skills. Church youth group, going to the zoo, museums, amusement parks, ball games, professional games like the Astros, the Texas Rangers, the San Antonio Spurs, Austin Ice Bats, which is a hockey team, any of those types of things. For infants, toddlers, and medically fragile children, that could also be story time or tummy time, where we're working with them. Sky Zone Trampoline Park, letting them go jump at urban air, going skating. Attending the movies on a weekend. Sibling visits at a location where they can play, eat, and have a structured activity. Summer camps and spring break camps. Vacations that you may go on throughout the year or in the summer, as well as weekend trips. Arts and crafts, family game nights, festivals, fairs, carnivals, and circuses. So those are some good ideas to document on your therapeutic recreation in a calendar, again, which is due for specialized and intense level of care children. Now, the things we don't want to include on a recreational calendar are occupational, speech, and physical therapy. Even though it says therapeutic recreational calendar, we still need to kind of think of those things that we just listed prior to this section. Individual therapy, family visits at a CPS office, that's not recreational. Rehab services, routine day-to-day activities like going to the grocery store, running errands, dinner time, video games, or TV, that's not so much recreational. So here's the recreational calendar. Let me turn my screen a little bit so we can see this. Here's the actual recreation calendar and how we would go about documenting that. So you can see on here, we gave you a couple of different ideas. We even used a couple for younger children, for a little bit older kids, like going to the movies and seeing Minions. You can tell when this was typed a few years ago. But it kind of gives you some of those good ideas there. So turn the screen back. Personal belongings inventory. This is the one we say that is due at placement. So we're going to pick this up at the 7-day contact. Then it's going to be due quarterly whenever we do our quarterly evaluations. And then again at the discharge of the child. So here are a few examples over here for boys, girls, and infants that we're looking for. And this is where we're going to document it over here: number and child's possession and number of items needed. So this is where we could document socks, underwear, pants, shorts, long sleeve shirts, short sleeve shirts. Do they have a coat or a jacket? So that's where we're going to start documenting those things, and personal belongings. So personal belongings would be those tablets, Xbox, bicycle, things that they may obtain while they're living with you, or things that they may come with. Inappropriate items, these could be clothes that maybe don't fit. There are some instances where you may want to hang on to some of the child's personal belongings that they entered foster care with, because that may be the last thing that their parent ever gave them if this case should go to termination of parental rights, or the parent's whereabouts become unknown. So we don't want to just discard everything they come with because it doesn't fit or has holes in it, or whatever it may be. We may want to hang on to some of that, wash it, put it in one of those containers that you can get at the Container Store, Lowe's, Home Depot, Amazon, and maybe put that in the top of the closet, because that becomes a child's personal history too. Think about in your childhood, how many of you have all of those things from your childhood, whether they were a baptism gown or your toys. My parents have hung on to all of mine and my brother's toys. She still has all our Transformers and GI Joes and those types of things. So these may be things you want to put away for them to be able to keep as mementos, keepsakes of their childhood. Travel request. This is, again, where we want to make sure that we at least give CPS 14 days notice prior to the departure. So we want to fill all this out, the child's name, the family's name, destination. If you're going to visit a relative, you put the relative's address on there so that they know exactly where you're going to be should there be an emergency and we need to get a hold of you. The purpose of the trip, that could be vacation, visiting families, attending a wedding, whatever the case may be. We want to make sure that we're doing that. Emergency numbers that we can reach, the foster parents' cell phone numbers, wherever it is that you're going. If you're going to a hotel, maybe list the hotel phone number on there. Or if it's a relative's home, you may want to list their landline or their cell phone number. But that's the travel authorization. Here's the doctor dentist form. This is, again, what we're going to take every time we go to not just a physical exam or a well child visit, but our dental exams, our vision and hearing screenings, the psychiatrist for medication monitoring. So we want to make sure that we're always taking this with us. A lot of these things you can pre-fill. Maybe you could even type some of these and print them, where it has the child's name and date of birth, their personal identification number, which you're going to see on the placement paperwork. It'll have it on there, your caregiver's name and address and all. And then we can leave the rest for the doctor or practitioner to fill out as they go throughout the exam. But again, we want to make sure we take those to every visit with us. Medication log, you're probably pretty familiar with these, but again, we just want to make sure we are documenting all the medication this child is taking, whether that is a prescription medication, like they have strep throat and they're on antibiotics or penicillin, cough medicine. We want to make sure if it's a psychotropic med that we're documenting this on a daily basis as well, or an over-the-counter medication. If the child has a cold over the weekend and we gave them Tylenol allergy sinus, that's a PRN over-the-counter as needed medication. Remember, this is also for things like melatonin, supplements like vitamins, omega-3s, multi-minerals, probiotics. Also, I would encourage you to document if you put essential oils on a child, behind their ear, on their wrists, those types of things. I would definitely document that. Mainly if that child had an adverse reaction to it, we have documentation. If we can't figure out why this child is experiencing swelling or a rash, now we can look back and we have documentation of that. And so it's documented proof this child may have those allergies to something of that nature. Medication, med error report form, make sure that we document any med errors, like if a child skipped a dosage or was given the wrong medication, refused their medication, we're documenting that. The foster parent log. So here's some really good ones. We try to do 3 different sets of logs here. A child that is a young child, a child with habilitative or medical needs, and a teenager. So that way you can get some ideas. Whenever you're looking at this, a lot of families will try to just check on some of these boxes and turn it in. Guys, if you check the box, we need you to elaborate. We need you to write down here in the narrative why you checked those boxes. And so this, again, this is a 3-year-old, really good notes. This was actually copied and pasted from one of our foster parents who wrote really good foster notes. But it gives you some good ideas here about those different types of things. And then recreational and cultural. What did they do for recreational? He went to church youth group. They went on family bike rides. They did family night at the zoo, story time at the library. They went to Herman Park, a play date in McDonald's with another child. So that's your recreational activities that we want to list there. Contacts. Did this child have any contact? For this particular child that we used, his parental rights were terminated. So there were no family visits. He had no siblings. However, he did have a visit with his former foster mom. So they documented that contact there. Appointments. Again, this is all of our medical and dental appointments, like a well child exam, biannual dental exam, hearing screening. And then we want to summarize down here in the bottom, how did that visit go? Was everything normal? Was there an abscessed tooth? Did we see any tooth decay? Do they have immaculate hygiene skills? What's going on in that child's life, so that we're documenting it there. And then any service plan goals that we are identified in the service plan that we're also meeting in that child's day-to-day life. And then here's a child that we used as an example that is medically fragile. And had habilitative needs. So if you have a child in your home that does have these needs, this kind of gives you an idea here as how to document those different types of things. And then lastly, the last one that we did was a teenager. What I really liked about this foster parent's notes is she did a really good job of documenting a good balance of the negative behaviors as well as the positive behaviors and how they handled it. So again, these are some really good ideas that kind of hopefully will get your brain to working whenever you start documenting your foster parent notes and seeing what some good examples are. So that's for you to hang on to. I would strongly encourage you to hang on to it so that you have those examples. Make sure, guys, that you do turn your documentation test in to your Pathways family specialist. Once you turn it into them, they will complete the certificate, upload that to your file. You will get a copy of it. Extended Reach will extend you a copy of it for your records to keep, but then that goes towards your continuing education hours, as well as your first quarter training. If you have any questions, first people we want to refer you to is your Pathways family specialist and their supervisor, because they're probably more familiar with your case or your situation. For generic topics, you are more than welcome to email me. I am happy to help at sbatson@pathway.org. That's what we're here for. Thank you again, guys, for all that you do. Again, if you have any questions or comments or need anything, please reach out to us. Have a great rest of the week, and we appreciate everything that you do for our children.